All right, we're back here on the Chase Thomas podcast where Matt Wyatt is here. And Matt, you are a busy man. You still made time. You're all over the place. You're doing the radio show. You're doing the podcast. You're doing commentary. Do you have time to breathe? I mean, we have the Masters going on today.
Oh man, so happy the Masters is going on today,
Mm-hmm.
like in April.
Mm-hmm.
First of all, and beautiful weather today. And I'm on the radio live today,
Mm-hmm.
first time ever covering opening round of the Masters and opening day of Major League Baseball,
Mm-hmm.
which is always every year for us an easy show because opening day of Major League Baseball every year we have fun. We take 2 hours and just go back and we're like listening to old classic calls and Harry Carey and Vince
Mm-hmm.
Scully. We just sort of celebrate baseball. Well, today we doubled up because we had the opening round of the Masters, and so I'm just really happy to see green grass and sunshine. Even though the wind's supposed to blow there at Augusta, like what 30 miles an hour tomorrow, something like
Oh,
that.
is it really? I'm going
Yes.
back to
Well,
Atlanta, Martha.
it's supposed to blow.
Yeah.
To what degree I don't know, but I think they're anticipating that tomorrow.
Do you think you can pull off that tiger short sleeve turtleneck, that hot pink turtleneck?
Define pull off.
Mm-hmm.
If you know, it, could I pull it off? My wife would laugh,
Yeah.
but she still loves me.
Uh-huh.
And that's not exactly pulling it off, though, is it? No.
Right.
A few years ago, I could have, but not anymore. No, I don't think I'm the hot pink, tight, show off your biceps, short
Yeah.
turtleneck anymore. I couldn't do it.
No, I don't think I could do it. Turtlenecks on guys. You just got it's bold move. Turtleneck on a dude is just it's not going to work for most people. It's a good in theory thing, but it's just
Yeah.
not a good idea.
It only works if you're Tiger Woods
Yeah.
or if you're like Randy Quaid playing Cousin Eddie in Christmas Vacation.
And it works for a different reason though, where it's just iconic. It doesn't look good. It's just it fits you. It's like one of those where it makes sense.
Right.
Well, why did I know you recently went from 3 to 2? Why the change?
Yeah, I was doing 3 hours. Okay,
Yeah.
so
It's a
this
lot of
show,
content.
well, it is, and you think about it, 3 hours by yourself on the
Mm-hmm.
radio for 5 days a week. Now, could I do it? The truth is, yeah. I mean, if that were the only thing I was doing, to make a living, then yeah, I could have continued to do that. But what happened was sort of twofold. One, everything around the radio show is just getting busy and, more work. That's, doing video production stuff and editing and other media production. Those things take up a lot of time. That's been growing. Other projects you want to work on, which only leaves so much time. And
Mm-hmm.
I felt like I was sort of neglecting that third hour. I felt like most days I was spending that third hour of the show every day looking ahead and trying to get a jump start on everything I had to do when the show was over, as opposed to really doing a good third hour.
Mm-hmm.
So just needed to cut it back. And 2 is just right now. It's really seems to fit. And yeah, so that's the reason.
So you think it's permanent? Not going back to 3 anytime soon?
Well, I wouldn't. It's hard to say permanent.
Mm-hmm.
Certainly, I just hesitate to say permanent because, you know, I've had a lot of things I thought were permanent and they never have been. So it's you
It's like the
just
only thing that's constant is change in this world.
that's it. Especially in media.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you just look at an industry as a whole. There's nothing that has maybe had more transformative change over the last 10,
Mm-hmm.
15 years than just the media industry as a whole.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, think
yeah,
about it. We had decades where it was just understood that you got the newspaper, you read the newspaper, you had the radio dial, you had a couple stations, you had a couple TV channels, and that was it. Like, and that was how it was for so long. And now it's just, I mean, I have an undergrad degree in journalism, and I'm about to have my master's this year in communications, but it's just something I thought about where I'm like, a lot of the stuff I learned in undergrad years ago is just outdated. Like it's like, what did you pay for? I got this education that like is out. It's not their fault, but it's just, it changes so quickly and so rapidly now that it's hard to
sure.
prepare kids for what's to come. Like, it's just really hard to do that. Like I'm curious, like if I want to eventually teach a class in journalism at the college level at some point, like that would be something of interest to me because I just, it's got to be so flexible on your curriculum every year, and that's hard. A lot of other industries aren't going through this.
Right. You're right. And then too, it's hard to also zero in on just one thing.
Uh-huh.
Okay, so you brought up newspaper. Well,
Mhm.
what is a 10, 15 years ago, you go, well, so and so's a writer
Mhm.
for this publication. But now, you may have someone in sports media that sort of is a writer and a journalist, but they're also a vlogger. They also are podcasting. They also, are, you know, who knows what else they're doing in their job, a videographer,
Mhm.
because everything is together. And honestly, Chase, like I saw that coming, and I'm older than you too, right?
Mhm.
So it was one of those where it really hit home for me because I didn't have my whole career in front of me. I had about half my career left in front of me when I looked up 10 years ago and go, man, this thing's changing. Okay, so if I'm going to be in radio, I'm looking at it 10 years ago, 2012, going, by the time 2022 comes along, you're not going to be doing just radio. You know, what you're doing may be on the radio, but it's going to have a written component. It's going to have a live video component. It's going to have an on demand video component. Well, I had a previous, stint in sort of a video world because I started
Mhm.
in local television. But that was, I'm so old, that was before digital. When I worked at the
Mhm.
TV station in Tupelo in the early 2000s, it was still tape, DVC Pro tape.
Yeah.
So I'm like, I know a lot of this stuff, but I've got to relearn it. Okay.
Mhm.
You could see it coming that by the time we got here where we are now, there's really no such thing as radio or television. It's content,
Yeah.
and which as well as anyone. And I could really see that coming and felt like, okay, you better brace yourself and get ready. So now, like, you're right. Like, you wouldn't just teach a course on, writing for print. Why would you teach
Yeah.
that? It better have more to it than that, right? So you're exactly right.
Like there's just a lot of ill-prepared kids that I've seen, and it's just you have to be there's a entrepreneurial aspect to this that I think is necessary to chase this thing. Where I talked to my family and my girlfriend about this, where it's like you and we're kind of in like it's not entertainment, but there is a Hollywood type component to what we're doing where it's like there's no middle ground really. Like a lot of people don't have a middle ground. That's why they fizzle out and they go do something else because there's not you either do pretty well and you're set and you're good or you're just going to see how long you can grind and operate a loss. Like this podcast was a loss for me. Like this was a bad like it's like a restaurant thing where it's like you're losing money for a while and then you just hope that you produce good meals and you get enough word of mouth where it's like this place is pretty good. You get some consistent turnout and that kind of thing. That's I feel like a restaurateur sometimes because of that kind of thing, but you just got to keep at it and you'll see how much you can stomach. Where it's just I don't think kids knows that like if I could have done college all over again, I would have been like, okay. I mean, I interned at the radio station, which was important, and that's how I got into podcasting. Where I was like, I don't want to do radio because that's not my expertise. Because I'm a lot more radio is just I think you have to have a different skill set with podcast a good podcaster and a good radio host are very very different things
Very different.
and
Yes.
I couldn't do what you do like you doing a solo show for 2 to 3 hours a day. No way. I'm out after 15 minutes where I'm like, all right, that's all folks, that's all I got. I don't know what else I can do for you, but I can't do the dead air and just sitting there. I need to bounce things off other people and I need to have that conversation, but that's like things it's hard to teach that and it's hard to figure out what your comfort zone is. But if you're just like, I want to be a writer, I've got to bat like it's just not I don't want to be like a Debbie Downer, but it's like you can't do that. You need to be like, all right, I need to get video, I need to learn video, I need to learn coding, I need to learn how to build websites, I need to learn how to use social media, I need to learn how to write. I mean, writing will always be but you need more. You can't just
Yep.
have that. And I think it's just a lot more to take on. So I think you have to be more honest with kids of like if this is what you want, there is a lot more work than it used to be to make this a full-time thing. And you might work 3 different jobs and have 3 different streams of income to make this work. Like it's just complicated, as you well know as well.
It really is, and for people who have sort of begun to wade out of the other side, and come out the other side. And you look back and you're giving that advice to people who are on the front end of this, they're just stepping off into the creek, into the swamp, on their journey. It's hard to maybe get it across, and maybe they still don't understand. But you're right. It's not only a grind, but it also is. There's got to be some luck involved, and that's timing. And there's also got to be an element of you either are good at it or you're not. And those folks will come out the other side. And one of the ways that you become good at something, anything, is you get a lot of reps. Okay, so you're talking about radio. So I'm pretty far in radio terms. I'm pretty far down the road in terms of reps, and twofold, because it's not just talk, but also calling games. And so every experience you've had with a headset on and a mic in here on live radio, that all adds up to live reps, where you become less distracted by the break's about to start in 30 seconds. How do I wrap this up? How do I take that call? What about this comment? Breaking news is happening. How do we cover that? You're less distracted by all the things affecting you, and you just handle it, and you can rattle it off. Couldn't do that when I first started, but now it's a little bit easier. And so anyway, I'm chasing a rabbit, which is something radio people do very well.
No, this is interesting. Yeah.
But I would say that it is one of the positives about the way that the kind of the marketplace is in media, sports media. There are a lot of negatives. The barrier to entry is kind of a negative because anybody can get started if they want to get started. They don't all last, obviously, very few do, but anybody can get started. It's a very low barrier to entry.
Yeah.
But in order to last, and in order to sort of come out the other side of the swamp on dry ground, you have to be good. And those that do are pretty good. Those that cut through are pretty good. One thing, too, on what you said, the radio versus podcast, you're right. It is very different. And one of the last times I talked to you, I remember making this statement. I still believe it. I really cut down on the amount of content I consume. And I did it intentionally because I started feeling like I can't be an avid consumer and a constant producer of content, because pretty soon they become one and the same. I consume it and I spit it out the other side, and it's like I'm just repeating stuff I've heard. I'm repeating stuff I've seen. You got to be original. But the stuff that I do consume from time to time, I notice if I turn on a podcast and it sounds like a radio show, I generally don't hang with it. If I've gone to it for the purpose of listening to a podcast, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
It's like you guys that are great in the podcast world at conversation and thought and provoking thought have trained us that that's what we're going to podcast for. And it's a little bit of an ambiguous term. You go podcast. Well, my show has a podcast. Well, what it is my show on demand via the. It's not a podcast. Like, you're not creating it with a podcast in mind. It's just in podcast platforms. Those are two different things. Yeah. That's right. Or a podcast audience. It's strictly, it's going to be there if John Smith from Wiggins, Mississippi missed the show today and he wants to go get it. Well, there it is, John. You can have it. It's there. It's sort of but you're right. It's two different things. I really admire too the people like yourself that you've seen, you had a vision of what you wanted your podcast to be, and really have stuck with it and been consistent and putting in the work. I admire that a lot.
I appreciate that. And I mean, this is, I tell family, I feel like I'm repeating this, but like one of the things I've said, because I've been asked like, oh, I have so-and-so who is thinking about getting started with the podcast. And I'm sure you get this a lot with radio and stuff like that. And I always tell them, like, I'm not the person to talk to. Do not ask me, because you're not going to like my answer. And it's just, I don't want to discourage them, but I think there has to be some level of discouragement from people, because you'll figure out if you're built for this. Where my mom's an accountant. My mom is a a very realistic woman. I love her to
Mm,
death because of that, because she would always be honest and was just like explaining, oh, you want to be a professional podcaster, how is this going to work? Like explaining that to an accountant is just a tough thing, and explaining it to just a lot of people who do normal jobs. Like this is not a normal thing. And it's like, all right, how are you going to do when you have 7 listeners on Tuesday? How are you going to do when you have 9? Or you go backwards, you go to 4, or one week you get 120, and then suddenly it all evaporated. And you're like, wait, where did it, what are you going to do? How are you going to respond? Talk to me once you've gotten those reps in. Like I can help you if you've put in the time for months and like you're still like, all right, here's my tape. You kind of have like some background, you have some experience, so I can be like, okay, now I'm seeing where you're at. Find, because you need to find your voice. You need to find out what works. You need to fail over and over again. And I don't believe in failure in the sense of like you can mess up. Like part of this is messing up. This show has changed over the years. Like I've learned what I like and what I don't like. Like one of the biggest things, I can't even listen to myself like 6 years ago because I was far more into the idea of like, oh, I gotta be a personality. I've gotta like get my Skip Bayless take or like go super strong Bill Simmons and things like that. And I was like, but that's not who I am. So it speaks to what you're saying, where you're like, when you're consuming a lot of other content, you're like, oh, that's popular. That's, and then you realize you're like, oh, that's not me though.
sure.
I'm more like you and like a Will Leach, who's a friend of mine, where it's like, I don't want to interrupt. I don't want to feel like I dominated a conversation. If I talk more than the guest, I messed up.
Hmm.
I messed up because I want you to learn something from my show. Radio is more about entertainment. It's like I just love spending time and hanging out with you. Like when I'm stuck in traffic, like you're making me laugh, you're engaging me. Like it's just, it puts me in a better mood. Podcast people listen to while they're doing housework because they're like, I want to learn how London, where the Roanoke colony went while I'm doing dishes for 20 minutes. Like that's what I want it to be. So it's like when they listen to this with you and I, they're like, wow, I learned some Mississippi State, I guess, at some point on this podcast, but they learned something.
Hmm.
That's the whole goal. And that when I realized that light bulb went off, where I'm like, this is a learning podcast, and I am not going to be a hot take guy, and I am not going to be that person because that's just not who I am. It gets a lot easier because then it just feels like you're not working; you're just being yourself.
It's so true, Chase. I mean, what you're talking about there is sort of finding your purpose. You know,
Mm-hmm.
one of the like hot words terms now is your why,
Mm-hmm.
WHY. You find your why this one that purpose. I mean, that's basically what you're boiling it down to. And yes, finding your voice along with your purpose at the same time is like this. Oh yeah, I get it. And
Mm-hmm.
it almost kind of reignite your excitement, and you start hammering that purpose every day. And it sounds so, or can sound cliche, but it's so true. I mean, find any example you want to find. You know, it's raining outside. Okay, so I'm going to reach over here and pick up this 7-iron out of my golf bag and hold it
Mm-hmm.
over my head. Well, you take something and try to use it in a way that is outside of kind of the purpose it's created for,
Yeah.
the way it's made, and it's going to fall short of its potential. It's generally going to be laughed at, and it ain't going to work.
Yeah. It's not sustainable.
Right. Same thing. I need to hit a 165-yard shot into this big green here, and I'm going to pull out my umbrella.
Mm-hmm.
And I take a swipe at the golf ball with that umbrella. Same thing.
Mm-hmm.
Fall short of my potential. It ain't going to get there. I'm going to be laughed at. It's just not going to, it's not genuine. It's not going to. So it's such an extreme example, but you get the point. Like, and here's a Matt's belief thing. God created people and things for different purposes and different ways. You talk about being yourself. You know, you're different from Bill Simmons.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I'm different than someone else doing radio. And
You're not Colin
so,
Cowherd.
no, and never going to be, and vice versa, you
Yeah.
know, for that matter. And so you kind of figure out, okay, this is what I'm here to do, and do it this way. And in doing that, that's sort of kind of fulfilling the way I'm made.
Yeah.
That's what's inside of me coming out. And
And
then it
that'll feel
starts to.
better than the numbers. That will feel better than those numbers. And that's what people are scared of. It's like even if you have a niche or you're not like the creme de la creme, whatever it is, I promise you, you'll feel better with less of an audience if it's more authentic. Like if you
No
every
question.
time.
No question. And that is, hey, go back and tell yourself that in your time
Hmm.
machine 6 years ago. You'd be like, come on now, like, what you talking about, Willis? I don't
Yeah.
know. But now you know you are so right. It's okay, I guess. People decide what their goal is in different ways, and for some people, maybe their goal is just strictly to make a living and make money. Maybe that's all it is. But for most that are successful and stay in it, you call it successful, but stay in it and have that dedicated audience, whether it's 1,000 or 100,000. You're exactly right. You get to a point where you feel like, you know what? I would do this for nothing.
Yeah.
You just feel good about it.
I would agree. Well, before we get into Mississippi State, I did have a couple of questions on the YouTube front because you do different kind of videos there. You were doing the vlogs. You mentioned the vlogging stuff. That's the one area I think when I was thinking about like how when I continue expanding my stuff and the brand, and I even hate thinking about myself as a brand, but that is part of like what you kind of have to think and think in terms of what your brand. It's the authentic part. Is like your brand is like that doesn't have to be an uncomfortable scenario.
Yeah.
But you do the vlogging and the family's involved and you have your wife on the show and stuff like that, where I've always been like iffy on family and friends. And I don't know, I've never really landed on anything. I haven't landed strongly one way or the other. I've just kind of been straddling both sides of the fence there where I'm like, I don't have a good take. Do they like being involved in the vlogging and on your show? No. Okay.
No, and now my wife, she doesn't want to be anywhere near a camera. And
Okay.
it's crazy because she was a news anchor. That's how I met her. She did
Huh.
that before, as a career, and she basically just walked away from it when she became a mom, and
Hmm.
and now she helps me and everything. But it's sort of like the backwards angle on that. Back you're a news anchor, so everything's always made up perfectly anytime you get in front of the camera. It's
Hmm.
makeup, it's preparation, it's hair. So the idea of being on camera without that stuff, like she's not going to do it. But being on the show now, she's happy to put on the headset and talk with
Yeah.
me. And look, man, people love hearing her on the show. She went to Ole Miss. She was a homecoming queen at Ole Miss in 2000. So I call her homecoming queen. I call her HQ. I always
Hmm.
have. And so people, the radio audience has gotten to know her that way. And listen, there's something about that happy, nice female voice on sports radio that, like, if it's a slow day and I want
Hmm.
phone calls, she gets on there and all these guys start calling the radio show because they just want to talk to her,
Hmm.
and so and she has a great voice, and I have tried like crazy to talk her into, hey, listen, we need to do this full time. Me,
Hmm.
you, morning show, husband, wife, something. I've also encouraged her. She's a huge fan of the Hallmark Channel, and I said, listen,
Okay.
I said, you start a Hallmark movie review or show review podcast. I'll produce all of it. I'll set everything up. You just talk. I'll do all the work because it's pretty niche, and I'm sure there are others, but she would enjoy it, and it might take off.
Hmm.
She's just nah, you know, whatever. I have not convinced her yet. All right, and Mary Liddy, our daughter,
That's a good idea, though. I bet you there is an audience for that. There's an audience. Yeah.
I think there is. It's
Hmm.
big enough, and certainly there was 2-3 years ago. Would
I
have
mean,
been
it's become a whole thing. I mean, what's her name? Candace Cameron has just become like a legend on that. She is a wild career arc because there are some people that know her completely from Full House as a child,
yeah,
and then
DJ.
there are other people that don't have any recollection of that and only know her from the movie, like the Hallmark Channel. It's just kind of funny that she has two very, very different audiences or
Right,
fan bases that do not know the other exists.
right. And before her, see, it was Aunt Becky.
Hmm.
Okay, it was help me with her name,
Lori Laughlin.
Lori Laughlin.
Hmm.
Because she was Aunt Becky on Full House, and she before Candace
Then
Cameron.
Prison Becky.
Prison Aunt Becky. Doggone, man. This is so proof that if you live long enough, you're going to see some crazy stuff. Aunt
Hmm.
Becky has gone to jail. But anyway, before it was DJ slash Candace Cameron, it was Aunt Becky on the Hallmark Channel movies. She was in
Hmm.
everything. And I'll admit that as a kid and an adolescent, like I kind of had a crush on Aunt Becky. And
Okay.
now here she is, and now she's in jail. But then,
Yeah.
and so DJ takes over. But yes, it's a good idea. I just haven't gotten her talked into it yet. Maybe.
Yeah.
But okay, so back to your question.
Yeah. Well, I think I cut you off with Mary Liddy.
Yeah, Mary Liddy,
Mm.
she's so outgoing, has no issues with talking on the radio, talking in front of people, singing in front of people, being on camera. She loves all that. But with her, it's like she's so busy and never in one place long enough to really even,
Yeah.
nail it down. So I will tell you on the vlog thing,
Mm.
a lot of that was experimental because I had no way of knowing, is this something that's going to have an audience and be worth the time? I haven't been every day consistent, which is hard to be, but I will tell you one purpose that absolutely served, that I'm so thankful I did it. Whether it got one view at all on some of those vlogs that I put together, is a great way to force yourself to learn the video production side of
Hmm.
things. Handling the camera, shooting with the camera, processing the video, editing with whatever nonlinear editor, whether it's Final Cut or Premiere or DaVinci. If you're going to vlog, you're going to learn some of those skills, and there's no telling what it may open up for you. So I'm thankful for that. It was just a way to put in the work.
Hmm.
And now, let's say there's, I'm not a daily vlogger by any stretch, but now if there's an event. Last year, Mississippi State goes to the College World Series. They're playing in the finals, a chance to win it. I'm there by myself. I take everything. I'm going to produce some videos for it. But while I'm there, I'll vlog it each day. So, yeah, it's good to have learned how to have done that.
Are you like me where I struggle with this because I'm a lot more introverted than people would assume? Where they know that you talk for a living and they want to, like, all my friends who are in business by day and they want to like talk sports at night when it's like, no, that's the last thing on my agenda. Like one of the many reasons I love the Sports Renaissance Woman is that, like, she has no interest. Like, that's a separate part of my life. Like, I don't have to talk about it. She doesn't ask. Like, I get to turn my brain off from that. And I feel bad because it's a disconnect with family and friends where they want to talk to me about it. And I'm like, well, imagine it being flipped where I was just like dying to talk to you about your day at JP Morgan or whatever, and just be like, here, tell me about what the ins and outs were for today. Like, that's just not
No.
something I enjoy doing. And it stinks for me because I'm like, I really don't want to have a Tennessee Volunteer conversation with someone who just like tunes in every other week and it's just like, oh, Harrison Bailey's, he's the guy. And you're like, all right, man, whatever. I can't. Like, I can't.
Can't have this conversation again. It's the fourth time today. No, I totally get it. Hey, people would be surprised, wouldn't they, at the number of introverts who
Yeah.
are in some sort of out front media. It's crazy how that works, because I'm sort of in that group as well. Here's what you're saying. Years ago, when I was working at the television station, we did an outdoor show also that I hosted. We did a thing. We went fishing with this guy who was a successful football coach, and we're out there in his boat at Sardis Lake, and we're fishing, we're catching fish and all. And he's telling this story about how the coach that influenced him the most when he was a young coach told him, you've got to have a hobby. Okay? Even if you don't have one, get one, figure it out, and get into it. Whatever it is, get into it. He says, because you're not going to handle this coaching thing unless you have one. And he said, fishing became that hobby for me. And he said, I love it more than coaching. And I'll admit it. He said, but it's the thing that's got me through all of this stuff. Okay, so the same dynamics, what you're saying is, you can't go and pour yourself into trying to be good at covering, talking sports, whether it's having opinions or providing information, and then outside of that, also do the same thing.
Yeah.
It's got to be something different. You got to have downtime. And you're so right. Another sort of example of that would be for me. This is terrible to say, but I'm just admitting it. I've had a lot of times, even going all the way back to when I was a player in college.
Hmm.
When I'm in Starkville, as a football player on the team. But since then, in my media career, because I've always been on the radio for State and these things, on Sunday mornings at church during football season, for a lot of years, and still some now, I sort of intentionally sneak in just a little bit late,
Hmm.
and I'll sit in the back, or our sanctuary we go to church has side doors. Instead of going out the back where everybody else goes, when it's over, I'll slip out the side door. And you hate to say that because you sound so arrogant, conceited that you don't want to be around people. It's not that. It's just that time of year, if I
You know what they're going
don't,
to say to you.
I know what the questions are going to be.
Yeah.
It's going to be 8 different times between here and the Sunday school room. I'll be late for Sunday school, and I appreciate that people see me as someone they want to talk to about those things, but I can't. I can only take so much of it.
Yeah. It's like, when I'm on the radio, call me then. And if
Right.
you can't fit it in, well, then, hey, there's always next week.
You know what I should probably do? I should probably create a little thing on my phone that is a QR code, right? Give me a question on football, and it's about the game. I just hold this up, and they see this QR code, and if they scan it, it'll take them to my opinion, right?
There you go.
I said it last night. Here, just scan this, and
Yeah.
there it is. Isn't
There
that
you
terrible
go.
to say that? That is ridiculous to say that, but
I mean, it's real. Like, I think that's why I enjoy my time with others. Like, that's part of the reason I don't want to talk more is I like associating with other people who understand where I'm coming from and understand what I'm going through, because I don't have anyone in my personal life who understands kind of my days and like why I'm frustrated with stuff like that, or what, like, it's just a very unique thing. And I don't want to appear standoffish, but there is something too where I'm like, I can't do this. And you have to have boundaries, like setting up boundaries. People love saying they love boundaries, and then it's like when they encounter your boundary, they're like, whoa, whoa, whoa. Like,
mm-hmm.
I just meant my boundaries. Just respect mine. I didn't like say anything about yours.
Yeah, those boundaries, they go both ways, don't they? Have
They do.
have you reached a point yet where that same dynamic we're talking about there can affect which sporting events you choose to watch? That may sound weird.
Um, no, because a lot of it there is crossover, so I have to watch them. So like I have to watch Tennessee stuff. Like there's no way around me watching every Tennessee game.
Sure, yeah,
Which has been
sure.
great the last year. I mean, we're in everything school now. I don't know if you knew this or not, Matt, but Tennessee baseball might not lose again.
Hey, they
Um,
are good. They are really good, and Vitello he is a rock star, man. It
I
is
hope we can keep
incredible to
him.
see.
I hope we can
Yeah,
keep him.
you look at him, and I think it's right to say, if you're a Tennessee fan, I hope we can keep him,
Hmm.
because you're going to have to fend people off. Period.
Yes.
It's coming. It's coming, and it's just a matter of, does he want to stay and what's the offer and those kinds of things. But
Well, we got money. I don't know if you saw Nico Yamaliava on the way. So the money is coming out. Danny White, I told my family member, this is like one of those things where I'm like, I'm not talking about this. I'm not doing the whole Fulmer thing because they all love Fulmer. They all love Fulmer. And they still have not gotten over Fulmer getting fired. And they're like, well, the common thing is like, well, look at him since. What's Tennessee been since Fulmer? It's like, well, the two, they're not mutually exclusive. Like, you can still make the right move at the time and then not follow up the right way. Like that happened. Like Fulmer
right,
still should have been out at that point, but they botched the stuff after that. So that doesn't it's a line of thinking that
well,
I've
and
never understood.
okay, people would never. Oh, I promise you, I'm not trying to needle anyone. I'm strictly trying to
Yeah.
make a smart example here. But Lane Kiffin,
Hmm.
is he a good football coach? I mean, you look at him now. Yeah, okay, he's a good coach.
Hmm.
Somebody hired him back then, right? There's no way to know that USC's going to come open. He's going to bounce and pull
Yeah.
that stunt after 1 year. There's no way to know, and you're having to deal with all that, and Hamilton's having to deal with all, he's got You're paying more buyouts than anybody else in the
Yeah.
country for all these years. So the situation was compounded, and it's not like, okay, you
There's
just
always
if
more
you
nuance than people want to give credence
yes,
to.
right. It's like you look at Kiffin. Guy's a good football coach.
Yeah.
He is. Okay, and it may not. It's not Tennessee's fault that he was there for 1 year and that's it.
It was a
It's
good
his
hire.
fault.
Like the process was still good. It was just like one of those
Right.
things that just if USC doesn't come open, he's there for a while. And you saw Bryce Brown and what he was doing on the recruiting trail immediately. Like the Dooley stuff, like we don't have to relitigate all of that, but
Sure.
I
Yeah.
that was one of those things I just didn't understand. But like with the Danny White stuff, like him coming in, it's like the money's there. Like Danny White was a fundraiser because UCF, excuse me, people don't realize the number 2 enrollment in the country. Like
Mm-hmm.
UCF has a humongous alumni
Huge.
base. They are a humongous school. So when he got hired, I was like, he's going to tap in. Like there's a big base, and if he's fundraising like that at UCF, he's going to fundraise and make some money for Tennessee quickly. So I told buddies of mine, like I have a lot of Georgia friends. I'm from Georgia. I'm like Tennessee's coming, and I think they're coming because the sometimes money just talks, and this is a program that has just had the money. They just don't know what to do. They just have too many cooks in the kitchen. But if he
Mm-hmm.
gets all those people together, and it's just like we're gonna go get Nico. And hey, it's still alleged. We don't know if he's the guy in the athletic piece. But hey, who knows? Carnell Tate
Yeah.
might be a Tennessee Volunteer after this weekend because they're all together in Knoxville. So I'm very excited. Like I don't want to say that me moving to Knoxville for grad school 2 years ago was the key to unlocking Tennessee sports all over again, but I'm also not saying that, Matt.
Hey, look, evidence is evidence, right, Chase? I mean,
Yeah,
yeah, no, they, and they've got the right guy in Heupel
yeah,
for that program. They needed offense and needed quarterback. Okay, and he's offense and he's quarterback, and you knew it. It was the criteria there for what they needed was so simple.
hmm
Okay, somebody as dumb as me could have made the list of who they needed to talk to, and he's on it for sure. And and then it's a matter of it's kind of like that luck piece. You got to have some luck
yeah,
pieces. Now the recruiting game has changed a little bit, name, image, and likeness stuff. Whether we like it, whether the rules state it or not, it is a part of it. And the Southeastern Conference too. It's hard to predict. I agree with you. Tennessee's on the way. It's just hard to predict what that's going to look like in 5 years when
yeah.
Texas and Oklahoma are going to be here. The new television contract's going to have kicked in with moving away from CBS over to all ESPN ABC, which is another what is it? An extra $250 million or something
Yeah,
total that's getting divvied up around the league. So everybody's going to have so much more money than they already do have just on that
yeah,
one deal kicking in each year annually. 2 new schools, and the scheduling model is going to change too. We're going to something. The problem is that from what I hear in the back channels is that you don't have anywhere near a unanimous deal within the league among presidents and ads about what that new scheduling model should be. Is it going to be
hmm
pods with 3? Is it going to be 9 conference games this way? Or because there are some who still don't want to play 9 conference games. Um, I don't know how they're going to avoid it, but
yeah.
until you get all those decision makers, ads, presidents agreed, okay, this is what the scheduling model is going to be, then it's not going to move forward to seamlessly. But you'll have something. But
Yeah.
in 4 or 5 years, you're going to have something. So it's going to change on everybody. You look up when they do a new scheduling model, who knows who Tennessee's going to have to play every year?
hmm
Who knows if A&M is going to turn into Georgia based on their recruiting or not? You look at State and Ole Miss. The air raid thing. It always takes off, and they become hard to defend. And State's the kind of team that with an offense and a Leach offense, they win 7, 8 games a year. Well, who are they beating? They're beating somebody, and
hmm
they're going to win 7 or 8 a year with Leach. They are. And so, who are they upsetting? Are they ruining Tennessee's season? Are they
hmm
ruining Auburn's? Like they did last year. Ole Miss. That's what you're dealing with in the SEC.
Yeah.
So I agree with you. It's all trending the right way for Tennessee. It's just they have to circle Georgia
hmm
and and who knows
I just
for
want to play Florida in November. That's all I want. Just move Florida in November. I am convinced that if we play Florida, or at least alternate when we play them, because
yeah,
it's just we're never figured out who we are when we're playing them, and it's just like give us November. Because if we played that game this year in November, we beat the tar
beat
out of the
them.
Gators in
Sure.
November. It was just the wrong time. I'm over it. I'm over the September Florida games.
How did
And this
that?
one's going to be so tense. This year is going because if you're not beating them with the Billy Napier rebuild year, with the expectations and Hooker, and there's just I'll be in the building, and I'm already tense thinking about it because everyone's going to be on pins and needles for that one.
It's in Knoxville.
It is in Knoxville.
Yeah, Tennessee will beat them this year.
Hey, look, hold on, Matt. Hold on. Let's hope so. Let's just. I mean, I've seen a lot of Tennessee Florida games in my lifetime, and that's.
Hey, look, and I know
Yeah.
some people are watching this podcast, but
Yeah.
for those that are listening, Chase just almost got up out of his seat right there when I
Yeah.
said that. He started moving around, just so you know.
It makes
really-
me uneasy. I wanna believe that. The only thing I'm certain of is the South Carolina Kentucky stuff's got to end. I can't that's just the offseason is out of control where we're talking about Stoops and Beamer getting co-coach of the year. Look, I don't know these guys personally. Look, good for them. Like they seem like good people, but I was in the building for Tennessee drubbing South Carolina, like really, really drubbing them. And it's just the co-coach of the year, newcomer of the year, Heupel having to share that with Beamer was not right. It was not okay. And Heupel's a trooper because I would not have been that good about it. Or wait, hold on. If it's a tie, don't we do it based on like who won? If we have a head-to-head, like is that not a separate thing? But
The
yeah, no, I'm not worried about
still
it.
matters, right? And the
Right.
scoreboard matters, or should anyway. I get
I
it.
think so. You went though to Iowa. You went to the Field of Dreams last year, didn't you? What was that like?
Yes. Oh man, I would go back tomorrow. And yeah, okay, it's kind of soupy because I have a nostalgic bone and this nostalgia itch that's got to be scratched, pretty often.
Same here. I got Ben Matlock for you right here, and Doc Rivers is Atlanta Hawks. So
I saw the Atlanta Hawks uniform and I wondered who that was.
yeah,
Ben
Ben Matlock,
Ben Matlock.
Andy Grit. That was my thing. Like people think I'm joking because I get called a boomer by my friends a lot because of how I am, and
Yeah.
like Ben Matlock was my jam. Like I love Bosch on Amazon Prime. Like I love stuff like that. Like no one my
great.
age does. Yeah, it's just who I am. I love Ben Matlock. He was an Atlanta lawyer. If you need a good Atlanta trial lawyer, that was my guy. I watched it on WGN all the time growing up.
Yeah, and what it was like, it was $100,000 a case, I think
Yes.
was his rate.
He loved hot dogs
He could afford a lot of hot dogs with
Yes.
the number of cases that he won over the years.
and
for
saving
sure.
on suits. He was wearing the same suit every day.
The same seersucker suit. That's right, Ben Matlock. That's great. Great theme song. I don't know that it's
Yeah.
Because it's if you go sitcom, it's not a sitcom obviously. So
Mm-hmm.
TV drama, it's probably a top 10 TV drama theme song if we were to go down that route. But
Murder, She Wrote, also good.
Murder, She Wrote, good. Again, we're talking about dramas. Don't get me on sitcoms because
Yeah.
it's Sanford and Son, and then The Office, and then everything else.
True.
It's sitcom theme song.
Yeah.
Home Improvement, underrated. Anyway, yeah. Where were we again? We're talking
Oh,
nostalgia.
Field of
Look,
Dreams. Yeah.
so the movie, the whole thing. To give you the short version, I'm a long-winded person, so cut me off. But we're out there. This thing could go to Wednesday, which would have been the game 3 with Vandy and State. It does go to the game 3. And so I know in my planning, I'm out here in Omaha, and I know, okay, they're going to play Wednesday night with the chance that State wins the national championship in baseball. And if they do, I can't be driving home the next day and not be on the air. I've got to stay out here to Thursday. Even though the team will go home, they won the night before, I got to be on the air on Thursday to have a national championship wrap-up show on the radio. So I stayed on Thursday and thought, if I'm here on Thursday, I got to spend the night out here somewhere on Thursday night. Why not? I'm by myself. I'll just leave Omaha and drive 5 hours to Dyersville, Iowa. Tour the Field of Dreams for about an hour, and I'll have a hotel room there, and I'll just drive home the next day on Friday. And that's what I did. So got off the air, celebrate the title, show, get off the air at 3, get in the car, leave Omaha, here I go to Dyersville. Beautiful drive, beautiful part of the country if you've never seen it in that time of year. It's unbelievable. And 5 hours is 5 hours in the car. But that time of year in the summer out there, and like up in Iowa, it's not getting dark until like 9:30 Eastern time that night. Okay, and the Field of Dreams was open until 9 p.m. I leave at 3. I pull up. I go down the driveway at 8 o'clock. I see the house. I get out. I have 1 hour because it's so late in the day. 2 things. One, there's almost nobody else there because it's 8 p.m. And 2, the sun is setting. It's golden hour. Anybody that's ever shot video or taken pictures knows I'm talking about how important it is to be somewhere at golden hour when the sun's just dipping. And even though I was by myself, the only thing that would have made it better is if I'd had family with me, wife, daughter, dad. But to see it, I would highly recommend it that time of year for anyone because the corn's going to be up. It's going to look like it did similarly in the movie. Dyersville's not a very big place. You got to think about the hotel thing ahead of time because there's like 2 hotels in that town.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and so
you can't sleep in the cornfields. You can't just sleep on the baseball field. There's no,
you definitely could because you could get lost out there for sure. Nobody would ever know you're out there, Oh, and you can, if you plan ahead and spend the money, you can reserve to spend the night in the house.
Oh.
That's sitting next to the field, the house from the movie. The bleachers that are there on the first base side are the actual ones from the movie that they were hammering the nails into. You can see the spot on the bleachers where Kevin Costner carved in it, Ray Loves Annie. It's just sort of a joke. Those things are there. Some of the layout has changed a little bit in terms of the walking paths. And when I was there this past summer, you could see off to the west the modern field where the Yankees and White Sox played later in the summer in the Field of Dreams game out there. You could see where that was built. But of all the cool things on that trip to go and to cover the College World Series, see State win it, first national championship, to follow it up with driving over the Field of Dreams it was a dream type of week, honestly. It was awesome. Can't recommend going up there highly enough.
There you go. I'm going to have to do that at some point. That would be good. Yeah. Has the Leach experience gone basically how you thought it would to this point?
Yeah. Well, let's see. The first game out of the chutes, putting up 600 yards on LSU. I know it was a COVID year. Now, I didn't expect that immediately. I don't think anybody would have. And 2, that same
How's KJ Costello doing, though? Seems pretty good. I think that'll work out.
My gosh.
I had him as a Heisman guy. Like, that was one of those where I was talking to people. I was like, he's got, like, I love that fit in Starkville. Like, this should be a slam dunk.
Well, and we all did.
Yeah.
And then the next week, that's what I was going to say, sort of this precipitous just downfall of the offense the next 2 weeks. Like, what do you do? I may be overstating, but I think it was like 4 interceptions against Arkansas or 3 the next week and then 4 or 5 against Kentucky the following week.
Kentucky was the dam breaker, right? Like, that was...
Yeah. It just was really bad. I mean, it went from first 2 to 3 weeks of the season went from as good as that offense could possibly look against anyone to as bad as it could possibly look against anyone in those last. But anyway, outside of that initial up and down, I think, it kind of has gone the way you expected in that it's going to progressively get a little better each week, a little better each month, a little better each year. It's not going to blow you away initially. There'll be some people that necessarily won't like it because you don't run the ball. You're just going to, but you're going to look at the numbers and go, okay, that's up. Completion percentage went up. Okay, touchdowns went up. And slowly but surely, and now they're about to hit a year where quietly they've got the pieces. They would have loved to have gotten Mekhi Polk back at receiver this year just for the continuity, but they'll be tough offensively when they roll it out there this year.
Well, I mean, you got Charles Cross, who's going to be a top 10 pick in the draft. You had a really good video about whether or not he could be getting number 1, and that's still in play because we don't know until we just get the first pick called out. It seems like it's going to be a lot of defensive tackles and defensive edge rusher guys. Like, this is going to be a lot of Thibodeaux and Hutchinsons and every Georgia player known to man. getting their name called pretty early. But
Sure.
there's a lot of talent there. It's just when you look at the quarterback rankings in the SEC right now, it's just so interesting because Will Rodgers, people don't know what to do with Will Rodgers. You can tell when you look at different pieces where people I respect, and I'll read it. I'm like, he's number 2 on some people's, he's number 13 on others. And you're like, no one has any idea, because what's unique about being a Mike Leach quarterback is like, you're not going to get the credit. It doesn't matter. If you're good, they're like, oh, he's a product of the Mike Leach system. And if you're bad, it's like, well, then guess what? That's on you. So there's no, if you fail in his system, it's on you. If you succeed, it's on him. So it's like, it's an unfair thing. Do you think it's a fair assessment on that?
It's interesting. That's an accurate observation with a lot of people. Yeah, if it works, it's the system sort of thing. And the thing about it is, I mean, those guys don't play in the system unless they're capable. That's one thing we've learned. Like, no, Mike Leach has never played anybody just because they were on scholarship and the other guy wasn't. You know, sort of deal. He's going to find a guy who can run the offense. And my theory, and maybe a little longer at State, and we'll have some video we could include them and maybe do a video on this. But my theory is that one reason so many of the Mike Leach quarterbacks have gotten chances and shots at the NFL and played and stuff is because of the sheer just unreal numbers of reps those quarterbacks get throwing the back shoulder against man-to-man, the fade in the red zone against man-to-man. They rep it more than anybody in the country. The offense historically has completed that stuff, the man-to-man stuff, better and more accurately than anybody in the country. And when you get in the NFL, that's the thing you have to be able to hit. You got to be able to have a threat of, if you're a corner and you play bump man on my outside guy and you turn your back to the quarterback, it may be a completion on the back shoulder. If you play bump man and you give my guy on the outside a step past you in the red zone, it's probably a touchdown in the back corner because the quarterback's that accurate. Well, those guys, all of them have done that in that air raid offense because they rep it to death. To the point that that's part of how it works, is it forces defenses to not want to play it, especially at the college level. And we could really get deep on it, but, you know, first game out of the chutes ever at State is LSU. What did LSU do? Played man-to-man. State beat it like a drum. And you're going, how are they? The year before, they couldn't throw. Could not throw the ball. You saw them in Knoxville. Like, throwing a pass was an adventure.
So that's still a Nick Fitzgerald year?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And here we are the very next year, and frankly, it's the first game out of the chutes, and just because of the way they practice, if you line up here and play zero coverage against my guys, we're completing the ball over your head because we can do it with one eye shut. That's the practice. Yeah. And so immediately, Barry Odom in Arkansas, they back off and play zone and say, you completed in front of us for 5 yards. And if you do that all the way down the field, we'll shake your hand after the game. But we don't think you can do it consistently enough. And sure enough, you couldn't. So that Will Rodgers is an example. He's the first freshman that's ever played for Mike Leach because of necessity. And he is a guy who has a natural accuracy about him. And Mike Leach will talk about that. There are a lot of guys with big arms that have come through there and stuff, but don't have that just natural ability to put it where a guy can catch it running. Will has that. And so as he continues to get bigger and stronger, he's really, up until this point, his body has still looked smaller and more like a high school. He's starting to look like a college guy now. He's
getting enough country
really
plays in.
Sausage, yeah. I mean, we eat good in Mississippi, man. He's going to these baseball games and hanging out in left field lounge. But
I don't know
he's going to get a shot.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, I'm excited to see what they look like because Ole Miss gets all the coverage. Like when it comes to football, Lane obviously bringing a lot of that. It's just a very different vibe in Starkville versus Oxford. Like, it's a completely different kind of program. Both fun offenses, but for very different reasons. But but it's also the defense. Like I think people overlook Arnett, and I think he is just like the unsung, not hero, but just linchpin to keep this thing moving with just the SEC is not about defense, defense, defense anymore. Saban flipped that. Like this is an offense
Yep.
league, and Kirby had to adapt. That's why he brought in Monken. Like you have to have that, but it's also with so much firepower all around the conference, you need to have the right defensive coordinator in there. And it seems like Arnett has been really, really good for State, and I think he's probably someone that should get a lot more love than maybe he's getting to this point, right?
I agree, and he is a very important piece for them, and having that continuity.
Mm-hmm.
And Chase, there's a lot about State these last couple of years where really if you just win some more games, to this point they haven't in the head to head between Leach and Kiffin. Leach hasn't won yet. Kiffin's won both, and so it's like
He's got a really bad game in rivalry games, right? Isn't Leach's rivalry numbers weirdly awful?
weirdly awful.
Yeah,
Washington State versus
yeah,
Washington, and
hmm
yeah, and so you win some of these other games, and there is more buzz and a little more talk
hmm
and attention and those kinds of things, and so that's really what it boils down to. But that's the other thing too is I think people around here it's hard to get used to the idea that the coaching staff stays together.
hmm
That's a thing about Leach that's been interesting is he's not been a guy who's had to replace coaches year upon year. When Mullen was here at State, it was like a new defensive coordinator yearly.
hmm
For whatever reason, it was just constant turnover. And so to see him keep a staff together, there's something about the way he runs things that guys get in there and coach for him and just stay, you know. And Arnett's a guy who's had some opportunities. He's interviewed at some different places, but he's stuck around, and it's really important. Their scheme is important. They're a 3-3-5, and which a lot of people are going to as a base just because everybody's spread, and you got to have slot corners now in the NFL. I mean, in college football, like the NFL, all that stuff. He's a fit.
If you want to stop Heupel, you definitely need some slot corners.
Well, that's it, and you got to be able to fake injuries.
Yeah. Oh.
Take a dive.
Look
for
at
a
you.
timeout.
You're throwing a bone for all my Tennessee listeners. I like it.
Well, we have talked about it, okay,
Mm-hmm.
and here's the thing. Like, I don't like it at all. It sends
Mm-hmm.
all the wrong messages. It cheats the game. There's always been a respect sort of for the game from coaches and programs over the years, knowing that an official cannot officiate whether or not you have faked
Right.
an injury or not. Okay, well, now it's being abused, and it opens the door to this. So I make a statement on the radio after all. I said, I think it's kind of an integrity issue
Mm-hmm.
is really what we're talking about here. Well, then I asked Mike Leach about it, and he's my coach in my school, and I'm not going to say he's got an integrity. He goes, yeah, they need to do something about it. He goes, but you can't let the other guys be good at doing it and get an advantage and you not be prepared to do it yourself.
Yeah.
And when you think, okay, you're paying these guys $5, $6, $7 million a year, he's just looking at it from a competition standpoint, going, look, if you're not going to do anything about it, and they're going to use it to their advantage, well, heck, we're going to use it to our advantage too.
Right.
So I don't know what the answer is. I know they're saying they're going to address it, but
I mean, I think the answer is you got to sit. Like it's the sit out stuff where it's like if you do
more
it, like you're
plays.
out. Like you're out for the drive. Like that's
Yeah,
it for the drive or something. You got to do something severe to that point where it's like, all right, you're injured, then you do not need to be on the football field for a little bit, or you've
sure.
got to be out, and that I
If
think
you
would curb a lot
can,
of it.
if you can get to the sideline,
Mm-hmm.
now I hate to say somebody should get up and hobble off if their legs hurt.
Mm-hmm.
But if you can get to the sideline, there's no sit out. There's
Right.
no timeout either, but there's no sit out. But if you're on the turf, man, I'm sorry, but you're going to be evaluated for a period of time. It's just the way it is.
Yeah.
So yeah. Then offenses can say, okay, well, we don't want the defense to be able to put a fresh guy on the field so that he can fall. Well, keep your guys on the field then, because if you substitute, they're subbing. It brings all that. So you're probably right. That probably is the answer.
Football is chess. There's always you think you got one move, and then you think you got him trapped, you got the queen trapped, and you just don't. There's always another move for a lot of these coaches.
That's right. That's
It's the
right.
most complicated sport, and it's not even close how complicated football is compared to every other sport. It's not even close.
No doubt. And
Um,
when you factor in roster management too,
mhm.
holy cow.
I mean, that's the biggest thing that I was just talking about that in the National College Football Show before this was that like the biggest thing that where it's not NIL, it's not the portal. It's this kind of bleeds into the portal, but fans, and I don't know if you feel like this when you have callers from Mississippi State, where it's like people don't know where Bo Nix is anymore. People don't know where their guys are anymore. It's
Yeah.
if unless you cover college football daily and you are a professional, it is an impossible sport to keep up with now. And what these administrators and what these people did not understand about these changes was that like the NFL can do this because there's 32 teams. Like you can have a bunch of movement with 32 teams. People it's a little bit more, but you can keep up with it. You can keep up with that.
Right.
130 with this kind of movement and just with the high school aspect of it, the graduate transfer, the port, it is impossible. There are going to be so many games now where people are like, who it's the Charles Barkley, who he play for, but it's just everybody. And that hurts the game. It's like people got like one of the things that helped college football forever was like, I get 4 years with my star. I get 3 at minimum with my guy. I get to grow with him. I get to watch him move up in the program. I get to just see him rise and get better year over year. Now you're not getting that. Now you're just getting people all over the place. And there's no, like, you're going to have a lot of JT Daniels where they play at 3 different spots in the course of their career. And you're like, where does he even associate his college experience with? Like, what hat is he wearing when he's 28 years old walking around post football? Is he rocking a Georgia hat, a USC hat, or whoever? Like, that is a totally different thing that hurts fan enjoyment. Like that is something that I am terrified for the future of the sport is that it's just too hard for the average fan to follow.
Chase, it's one thing that over the years has tethered the fan to the program.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, is the getting to know who your team is. Like, who are my players? What can they do? Is he going to improve enough from this year to next to give us a chance? Mm-hmm. What are those position best? So it's tethered the fan base to the program, that connection with the individuals. We're people, we connect with people. You've severed that.
Mm-hmm.
You've severed it. Or maybe severed is not the right word, but what you have done is you've made it really, really easy for a majority of your fan base to go, I'm just going to, I'll go to 3 games, but those other 4, hey, I'm out, man. I'm out on those. I'll stay home. It made it a lot easier for lots of people to go, I still like it, but I'll go to a couple.
Mm-hmm.
Or, you know what? I'm still going to watch. I still want them to win. I'm not going up there. I'm not spending my money. Because that's where we are now, 2022. 2 years ago, we had COVID and nobody got to go to campus. We shut it down. And what happened then? People who've been attending games and tailgating at 7 home games a year at all these schools went, a portion of every one of those fan bases who were the on-campus attendees every week went, man, I kind of like spending this money on camping or spending it on fishing or spending it on that camper or spending it on fixing up my truck. I kind of like that. You know what? I ain't going back. Okay, so you knew coming out of 2020, because of that, you're going to have to replace a certain portion of your fan base. You got to replace them. They're not coming back. So you knew that. Now this, with the portal deal, what you're saying, we don't even know who's on the team. I talk to a lot of people who say, hey, look, my approach, give me the roster in August. I'll learn the names and numbers in August. Just give me the roster then. All right, so you made it easier to disconnect there. I'm just going to back away. I'm not as connected to my team as I used to be. Well, if I'm not as connected, what am I not going to do? Spend money. 2, go. What did we just see? College football, this steady decline in attendance across the country that's been happening now for years. They've been monitoring it, trying to figure it out, but it's not a steep decline in attendance. It's just steady. Across the country, a steady decline. I think for these things I'm mentioning, that decline is about to get steeper next year and the year after that. And here's the scary part. It has been also coinciding with a the same decline, steady, not terrible, but steady decline in viewership in your playoff and championship.
Mm-hmm.
All right, if you're going to lose them in the stadium, you can't lose them on TV,
Yeah.
right? So that's the big thing that they're going to have to figure out. The portal, all that stuff makes it harder. I certainly don't have the answer, and that's why somebody like you uses the word terrified,
Mm-hmm.
is because we don't have the answers either. And we probably don't give ourselves enough credit, Chase. You and I could sit down, and we're smart enough to really, we could get in the room with some of these ADs and talk with
Yeah.
them about it. Okay, but we don't have the answers, and guess what? They don't either.
And the difference is, like, you don't have a czar. You don't have a Roger Goodell. You don't have someone to step in and lead. It's just every conference has their own agenda. Every team has their own agenda. It's just,
Right.
it's impossible. It's not one singular governing body. So when I'm saying I'm terrified, I'm like, there's no path to fixing this, because once the floodgates have been opened, there's no one. Greg Sankey's not saving this. He can't control what everyone else is going to do here. Like, the floodgates are open. Once they're open, you can't close them back up, and there's no organizational structure to get this back on track. So it's just so weird, because it's like they did this to themselves. They knew this was coming forever, and instead of just a little by little being careful, being thoughtful, working as a conglomerate, and being like, hey, this thing's coming, let's get on the same page so that it doesn't completely disrupt everything we've built over 100 years. Instead, they were like, well, we'll just deal with that when when that comes up. And then it came up, and there's no turning back.
No turning back. If I were to be forced to make predictions, one thing I'm pretty certain is going to happen. You're going to see more Bob Bowlesby's retire.
Mm-hmm.
News comes yesterday, he's retiring. Doesn't like the way things are going.
Greg Sankey's the longest tenured Power 5 commissioner. That's insane. He's the only commissioner pre-2020.
And so copy and paste that headline about Bob Bowlesby retiring, and just get ready. There will be more.
Mm-hmm.
And ADs, workers on stuff's coming.
Coaches. I know you talk to coaches. I talk to coaches. They're exhausted.
They're going to high school. They're going to the NFL if they can get there. And just get ready. And then other people will step in to make the money for a couple of years, and then they'll hang it up. I also think that it always leads me back to, okay, here comes Texas and Oklahoma. Somebody like the SEC, Sankey, he didn't necessarily seem to have great relationships with these other conferences or care that much about that.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to hook up and do the breakaway thing and have a whole different way of managing this. It may involve financials. I've heard coaches in college, guys that are currently employed, say the only thing that's going to fix any of this long term is to have a structure where you can have contracts with all your players. He said, coaches, they have the contracts, but there's a buyout. So if a coach bounces and breaks a contract, well, the school's at least going to benefit financially, and they've invested in him and promoted him,
Well, that's the NIL thing. It's the kids who dip, and like how that works when they get the money, and then they're like, all right, I'm transferring. It's like, whoa, I just gave you $1 million to do BMW Tuscaloosa. How does this work?
And I'm telling you, Chase, whether we know it or not, it either exists now or will at some point. And that is, there will be, if not already, a name, image, and likeness deal somewhere that you and I haven't seen language of some written agreement. And it says, here's the buyout clause.
Mm-hmm.
You transfer, here's the buyout clause. Here's how that works. We're not forking
You want to be an adult? You want to be a businessman? Like, here you go.
That's right. That's the real world. I was 5 years out of college working at a local TV station and had an opportunity, a tremendous career opportunity in the outdoor world that involved television stuff that I wanted to pursue. They came to me, and I could not go without contractually, without figuring out a way to come up with a lot of cash to buy out of the contract I was under at that time. I couldn't afford it. I couldn't take it. That's the real world. And right now it has swung the other way. It was imbalanced one way in college football. And to correct it, they've swung the seesaw back the other way, and that's out of balance the other way.
We're going to have a kid. This is going to be so sad, but we're going to have some kids going to jail for tax evasion with NIL stuff. in a couple of
Right.
years. Like that's going to happen. Like we're going to get these stories of like, oh, I didn't know I had to file this or I had to report this and that. Like the stories, like not yet. We're not there because it's still brand new, but there are going to be stories years from now where we're going to be like, what in the world happened? Because we're in the wild, wild west right now. And guess what? That's how it is now. But there's going to be some repercussions on that front that like I'm excited for the first athletic story on kid makes 3 million and didn't know I had to file that and claim that money. Because that's going to
Yeah.
happen.
If we polled college kids
Mm-hmm.
to define IRS and what it stands for and what it means and what they do, I mean, how many would know actually? A lot, but a lot wouldn't. Okay.
I
And
This is bad. I don't know if I should say this on air. This was something I wanted to prove to my parents when I was in undergrad. I think I was a senior, and we were at a restaurant. Our server was another college student, and I was like, I think we were talking something political, and I was like, I think y'all are giving my age group too much credit. Because I keep up with this stuff and I read it, it doesn't. I promise you, I know a lot of these. They do not know these basic things. I promise. I know you think they do, but they do not. And they were like, no. And I was like, all right, how about this? I guarantee you I'm going to ask 3 basic political questions, just basic to our server. I guarantee you she won't answer any of them. And she's in college. I guarantee it. And they're like, there's no way. So I asked her, I was like, do you mind if I ask, like, you don't have to say yes to this, but I have a couple questions. And she's like, yeah, sure. I asked her who the current vice president of the United States was at this time. This was when Barack Obama was still in office. She could not name the current president of the United States, who was the vice president at the time. And she was like, her first reaction was like, oh my God, I should know this. And I was like, you should know that. That's correct. Like that's a basic thing. You're not wrong. And I asked her the next day, I was like, who's the governor of Georgia right now? And she got more red. And my parents are looking at me like, I'm like, we're not done. We
wait,
got
and
one
this
more.
was in Georgia.
This was in Georgia.
Okay.
Yes. And no clue. No clue. I was like, Nathan Deal. And she was like, I don't even know who that is. And I'm like, I know. There you go. And I was like, give me one of our 2 state senators. And she's like, I didn't even know we had 2. And I looked at my parents and I was like, dinner's on y'all, because that was the bet. Or I was like, all right, dinner's on y'all. And they were like, I can't. And she was like, my parents would be so embarrassed. And I was like, I'm sorry. I didn't want to, but it was just,
Yeah.
I knew it. Like, that's just not a thing.
Right. Right. So, you're my starting quarterback,
Mm-hmm.
and look, we got meetings after practice and everything. And oh, by the way, listen, Wednesday night, I need to spend about 30 minutes with you. Why, Coach? We got to talk about taxes.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, we're talking about this because you're an 18, 19-year-old kid and you're rolling in $150,000 in a bank.
Yep.
I'm just saying too that there's a need on the up and up. I'm not even talking about the underhanded way. On the up and up, above board, there's a tremendous need for financial training and literacy,
Mm-hmm.
and just almost like from a well-being standpoint, if these athletes are going to have access to that at that age,
Mm-hmm.
because you ask anybody, I mean, you ask anybody, even the guys who went on and let's say had NFL careers and had millions of dollars contracts, you ask them at 18, 19, if somebody had walked up and put $80,000, $180,000 in the bank for you, what effect would that have had? And to a man, they all say, "Oh, that wouldn't have been good.
Yeah.
That would not have been good." And so we need to, for their sake, man,
Yeah.
have something in place where, and if
Guardrails.
they're, right, for their own good, have something in place that we do academic training. We talk to them about social media. Well, we're also going to train you about the financial part of this, because if you don't get it squared away in your head, it's going to mess some people up. And
I mean, my mom's
I'm
an
sure it's
accountant.
their
I would have,
fault.
100%. I would have given it all away. Like, I would have been overwhelmed. Like, Mom, do whatever you want with this. I can't, like, this is gone tomorrow. Like, I'm buying an $80,000 car tomorrow. I need you to take this now. Like, this has got to go, like, out of my hands.
Sure. Yeah. Instead of, when I was in school, instead of pulling that 15-foot aluminum boat behind my truck around
Hmm.
campus, it would have been a 21-foot bass boat, you
Yeah.
know, Ranger uh, that brand new, about $80,000, and then I'd spend the rest of that money putting gas in it. I
Right.
mean, and as fun as that would have been, it would not have been smart. So
Hmm.
that's the whole point, I guess.
Well, we'll end on this, Matt. What's your finish? Wait, I went fishing on Sunday. I'm back out. It's getting warmer, so I'm
Yeah,
feeling good about that. A lot of black bass up here in Knoxville, so diving into that a little bit. There's
right.
apparently some catfish in Lake Loudon, so I'm looking out for that. Big catfish guy. But what are you diving into? What are you looking for in the next couple weeks?
Oh yes, I mean where I am here in North Mississippi, I
Hmm.
think on the latitude I'm going to be a little farther south, so it's perfect where I live, and I've got two lakes here within walking distance of where I live, and so I bass fish primarily. So and we have largemouth, we have smallmouth bass like you have there in the river in
Hmm.
Knoxville, um, but it's a little bit farther north of here, up in like Quick in that area.
Hmm.
But here, largemouth bass. And what I do this time of year is I go in first thing in the morning when the sun's coming up, and I throw a top water,
Hmm.
top water baits, because you get to see them actually hit the lure and you catch them and everything. And then throughout the day too, we start sight fishing where you can actually see fish on the bed. Now I catch and release mostly, so
Hmm.
I don't mind if I see a fish on the bed, and especially a large one. You can flip and catch it, and then I'll release it, and it goes right back. I kind of, I would feel guilty about, catching one, taking it off the bed when she's getting ready to lay eggs and reproduce or whatever.
Yeah.
But then we brim fish here. Like I take my daughter this time of year, and we fish with crickets, and so that's
Hmm.
fun. And a cork, and she gets to watch the cork go under and nose to catch the fish and everything. But I will tell you this: so
Hmm.
going to a game at Neyland, I guess that was 2018, and I'm looking at that river.
Hmm.
It's just so beautiful, and it's right there on campus. See, when it just would not have been good for me to be a student at the University of Tennessee. I would have never gotten anything done except in that river. Um, I would
Well,
have
it probably
lost.
would have been better because that's a pretty polluted river. I don't know.
Oh,
You
is
might have
it?
been a different. You might have been a
Uh,
different person. You might have been like a cyborg after that. I don't know.
yeah.
You might have been
Have
like an
an
alien. Yeah.
eyeball over here, and yeah, walking with
Yeah.
a strange limp.
Yeah. The Tennessee River is better.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I didn't
Just
know
don't
that.
drink it.
Now, oh, I see. Yeah, yeah. If you swim, do this sort of thing.
Yes. Hmm.
Well, I hate to hear that, but I'm not surprised, unfortunately.
Yeah. Lake Loudon though a little bit different. Lake Loudon and yeah. I'm still learning because I'm still like I'm a Lake Lanier local. Like that's what I grew up in, and like Lake
Yeah,
Lanier was the big one. And the mystery there, folks, if you want to dive in and do some Lake Lanier is haunted type stuff and really understand why that's the weirdest lake in the country, just do some background. I know you're a history
doesn't it?
guy.
Doesn't Lake Lanier really? Doesn't it have big fluctuations? Like it'll get really low, or am I thinking of
Hmm.
some other lake? Like
I
the
mean, it does
water.
get fluctuations, but it was built on a town, so there's like they flooded a town to yeah. It. I'm telling you, Lake Lanier is just the
They
history
flooded a
behind it. It's a
town.
man. Hmm.
Huh. Did they let the people know they were going to flood the town? I mean, how much warning did they have, Chase?
Now I got to pull that up. I don't know what the gap in between. There was
Yeah.
no email back then, just to like get out of
Right.
here.
What they do? They put flyers in the mailbox. I mean, oh, maybe put a horse and buggy goes by on Main Street one day, and on the side of the buggy there's a sign that says, "This town will be flooded on." I don't know. I'm just curious about that.
Well, here it is. I got it for you. Oscarville is what the town was called. When Lake Lanier was formed in the 1950s, it washed over Oscarville and turned into an underwater ghost town.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's vague.
Hmm.
That's a little vague.
Well, yeah. I'm just look into it. I feel like you'll like the background there and
Okay,
what
yeah, I'm
all
going
went
to
into
read
that.
about it. I'm definitely going to read about it. Hey, so
Well,
you're going to watch the
mhm.
Braves tonight, right?
I am gonna watch the Braves tonight, 8 o'clock.
Okay, we played in celebration. I'm a Braves fan. We played a
Hmm.
bunch of clips of what it used to sound like when you would watch the Braves on WTBS when I was growing up, and Ernie
Yeah.
and Skip and those guys. And just for nostalgia, we played a clip. July 1986, Bob Horner hit 4 home runs in a game against the Montreal Expos. We played those clips, those highlights, and the Braves lost. Okay. That was 1980s Braves for you. Bob Horner hits 4 home runs in a game, but you lose.
People don't remember that. Like they just remember the 14 straight division titles, but it was the worst to first was a thing. And
Right.
I mean, I still have I was 4 years old when we won in 95, but there's VHS at my parents' house and of that whole thing. And I remember like how big of a deal and just growing up. And it was a thing. And now we got this behind me. Hold on. Let's see. Can you see 2021 there? So
Look at that.
updated.
Added the date. That's
Yeah.
it. World Series champs. I saw the sign. So, yeah, I'll be watching tonight along with you and every other Braves fan as we begin our title defense.
Yeah. And I can't wait to see what Ronald Acuna says next. Matt Wyatt, how do we...
Man.
Incredible. I love that was dropped the day before opening day. I just love that was...
Yeah, lots of drama with that Freddie Freeman. Lots of drama with that guy. I mean,
Hey,
what in the world?
no eye black in his clubhouse. Can't do it.
Weird
Matt Wyatt,
stuff.
how do we check out your show and everything you got going on?
Maybe the easiest way on Twitter, I'm Radio Wyatt. Lots of links go out there. And you can check out the website, Matt Wyatt Media. And if you're ever wanting to catch it on the radio, and of course the radio show, like I said, it goes out on podcast. But you can just look up the Matt Wyatt Show and it'll be there. And I really do appreciate it, Chase. It's good to talk to you.
All right, man. This was great. I know I took way too much of your time today. I did not think it was going to go this long, but this was good. This is a good conversation.
It's impossible for me to say anything in less than 2 hours. How about that?
There you go. Matt Wyatt, always a pleasure. We'll have to check back in again soon.